My name is Miriam Danso. I am 38 years old. And on a Tuesday morning, I woke up in a hospital bed with no memory of how I had arrived there, and a nurse standing beside me who said the first thing I needed to hear was not about the accident. It was about the man who had saved my life. His name was Daniel Asiedu. He had been driving behind me on the Kingsway Road on a Saturday evening when a car ran a red light and hit my vehicle on the driver's side. He had stopped. He had called the ambulance. He had given the paramedics my name from my driving license because I was already unconscious. He had then followed the ambulance to the hospital and sat in the waiting room. Not a friend, not a family member, a man who had been behind me in traffic on a Saturday evening. He had waited until the doctors told him I was stable. And then he had walked to the nurse's station and spoken to the charge nurse for 15 minutes. And then he had left. I had never met him. I had been unconscious for all of it. The nurse, her name was Dora, sat in the chair beside my bed and told me what he had said before he walked out. And by the time she finished, I understood that Daniel Asiedu had not just saved my life on the Kingsway Road. He had saved it again on the way out of the door. Let me tell you about the 50 hours first. I had been in surgery on Saturday night. The impact had caused internal bleeding. The surgery had been successful, but I had remained unconscious through Sunday and into Monday. My husband Solomon had been contacted through the emergency contact on my driving license. He had arrived Sunday morning. He had been at the hospital. He had been there while Daniel was in the waiting room. The two men had never spoken. Daniel had stayed in the main waiting room. Solomon had been in the family area closer to my ward. But Daniel had seen Solomon. He had been there for 50 hours. He had noticed things. And when he left, he had told Dora what he had noticed. Not loudly, quietly, in the manner of someone who has made a decision and is carrying it through before they change their mind. Dora spoke to me for 30 minutes. I am going to give you the shape of what Daniel had told her. He had said that while he was in the waiting room, he had observed my husband arrive on Sunday morning. He had known Solomon was my husband because Solomon had spoken to the admissions desk and he had heard my name used. He had watched Solomon across 2 days, not systematically. He had nothing else to do, and Solomon's behavior had gradually drawn his attention. Solomon had come and gone several times across Sunday and Monday. He had spent time on his phone in the corridor. He had spoken to nurses about visiting times, about parking, about the cafeteria. He had not asked anyone about my condition, not once across 2 days. That was the detail Daniel had fixed on. A man who repeatedly arrived at and left a hospital where his wife was in intensive care without asking a single member of staff how she was. On Monday evening, Solomon had gone outside. Daniel had seen him from the waiting room window. The window looked directly onto the building's entrance, and had watched him meet an older man there. They had stood near the entrance, talking for several minutes, long enough for Daniel to see the older man's face clearly, long enough to understand these were not strangers meeting for the first time. At the end of the conversation, Solomon had taken an envelope from the older man and put it in his inside jacket pocket. Daniel had not known what this meant, but he had known it felt wrong, and he had known one more thing. He had been in that waiting room for 50 hours, and Solomon had not asked a single member of staff about my condition. Not once. Daniel had sat with that for a long time, and when the doctors told him I was stable, he had gone to Dora and said what he had seen. He said, "I don't know if this means anything, but she has nobody here who is asking about her. And her husband met someone outside and something was exchanged, and I thought someone should know." Then he had left his name and phone number with Dora, and he had gone. The object at the center of everything was the envelope. I did not know what was in it when Dora described it. I did not know for certain for another 3 weeks, but I was a family lawyer. I had been one for 12 years, and 12 years of family law had given me a working knowledge of what kinds of meetings happen outside hospitals and what kinds of envelopes change hands. I lay in the hospital bed on Tuesday morning and I thought about my marriage. 7 years. I thought about the insurance policy Solomon had suggested we both take out 18 months ago. Large, comprehensive. His idea. He had handled all the paperwork. I thought about the fact that I did not know the name of our insurance provider. that I had signed documents Solomon had prepared without reading them as carefully as I should have. I thought about a man meeting someone outside the hospital the day after I arrived unconscious from a car accident, taking an envelope, putting it in his jacket. I thought about Solomon never asking how I was. I lay in the bed, and I held all of this very still. Then I asked Dora if she had kept Daniel Asiedu's number. She had. I called Daniel from the hospital phone. He answered immediately. His voice when I told him who I was had the quality of someone steadying themselves for a conversation they had been rehearsing. I thanked him for stopping, for the ambulance, for the 50 hours, for what he had told Dora. He said it was nothing. He said anyone would have stopped. I said, not everyone stays for 50 hours. He said, no, but some things you can't walk away from. I said, the meeting outside, the envelope, I need to ask you something. He said, I know. I said, oh, the older man. Could you describe him? He said, 60s, well-dressed. They stood near the entrance long enough that I could see him clearly from the window. They knew each other well. I could tell from how they stood together. I said, if I sent you a photograph, could you tell me if it was him? He said, yes. I said, thank you, Daniel. He said, Miriam, are you safe in that hospital? I sat with that question. I said, I am going to make sure of it. I want to pause here, because lying in a hospital bed, 12 years into a marriage asking a stranger if I was safe, is the moment this story became something I had been circling without knowing it for a long time. If you have ever had a stranger see something about your life more clearly than you could see it yourself, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now. Because what I found when I started asking the right questions and what the envelope contained is the part that changes everything. I called my sister Joana that afternoon. Joana was a solicitor. Not family law, commercial, but she knew enough, and she was the person I trusted most. She arrived at the hospital by evening. She sat beside my bed, and she listened to everything. Daniel, the 50 hours, the meeting outside, the envelope, the insurance policy I had not read carefully enough. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said she needed me to do something uncomfortable. She said she needed me to be completely normal with Solomon when he came that evening, and she needed to know everything I remembered about the insurance policy. I told her what I remembered. She made notes. She did not share her conclusions that evening. She said she needed 2 days. She took 2 days, what Joana found. The insurance policy Solomon had suggested 18 months ago was a joint life policy. In the event of the death of either party, the surviving partner received a significant payout. The policy had been arranged through a broker, a private firm. The broker was a man in his 60s, known in certain circles, for arranging policies with minimal verification and maximum payout structure. Joana found his name in the professional registry. She showed me his photograph. I sent it to Daniel. He responded in 4 minutes. He said, "That is the man from outside the hospital." The insurance broker's name was Harold Crane. Joana referred everything to the police financial crimes unit on a Thursday. She had documented the policy structure, the timing of its arrangement 18 months ago, the meeting outside the hospital, and Daniel's witness account of what he had observed from the waiting room window. The financial crimes unit began an investigation. What they found over the following 6 weeks. Solomon had arranged the policy with the intention of making a claim. The car accident had not been arranged. That had been genuine misfortune for his timeline. But the accident had accelerated his thinking. He had met Crane outside the hospital to discuss the claim process, to understand what documentation would be required and how quickly a claim could be filed. He had been planning this for 18 months. The investigation found 2 other policies in companies connected to Solomon's business network. A pattern of financial difficulty building for 3 years. Significant debts concealed from me throughout our marriage. Solomon was arrested in month 2 of the investigation. He was charged with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and financial deception within a marriage. He pleaded guilty to both charges. He is serving 4 years. The insurance policy was voided. The divorce was finalized 7 months after I was discharged from hospital. Daniel Asiedu. I met him properly for the first time 3 months after leaving hospital. A coffee. A quiet place. 2 strangers who were not quite strangers. He was a secondary school teacher. He coached football on weekends. He had been driving home from a match on the Kingsway Road on a Saturday evening when a car ran a red light. He said he had stayed for 50 hours because he could not think of anywhere more important to be. He said he had told Dora what he observed because he had a daughter of his own, and he believed someone should always say something when they see something wrong. He said, "I don't know if I did the right thing. I only know I couldn't not do it." I said, "You did the right thing." He said, "I'm glad you're well." I said, "Because of you." He said, "Because of you." I just stopped the car. We had coffee. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his daughter, who was 9 and wanted to be an architect. I told him about my practice, and the cases I found meaningful and the ones I found hard. An ordinary conversation, which was exactly right, because ordinary is what I was trying to get back to. I am back in practice now, 12 years of family law, and I am still surprised by what people do to each other inside marriages. What accumulates, what is hidden, what a person can build against someone they share a life with without the other ever seeing it. I review every financial document now, every policy, every agreement, my own name on my own life. I am thorough in a way I was not before the Kingsway Road. And I think sometimes about what would have happened if Daniel had not been behind me in traffic on a Saturday evening. If he had not stopped. If he had not stayed. If he had not gone to Dora on his way out the door. There are a lot of ifs in that list. Each one is a door that could have stayed closed. None of them did. The nurse's station log from Tuesday morning is somewhere in a file I have not opened since the investigation concluded. What I remember of it is this. A man left his name and phone number with a nurse at 11:17 on a Monday evening. He had been in the waiting room for 50 hours. He had not known me. He had seen something. He had said it. That is the whole story. A car behind mine on a Saturday evening. A man who stopped. A nurse who listened. A sister who came that evening and asked the right questions. And a woman who called a stranger from a hospital phone and asked him about an envelope. Here is what 50 hours in a waiting room taught me. The people who help you most are not always the ones who know you. Sometimes they are behind you in traffic. Sometimes they are the charge nurse who keeps a phone number. Sometimes they are the sister who comes that evening and says, "I need 2 days." None of them owed me anything. All of them gave me everything. Pay attention to the people who stop, not just the ones who call the ambulance, the ones who stay. And the ones who say something on their way out the door. Because that is the hardest part. And Daniel Asiedu did it without being asked. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. Some things survive everything, even the things that were supposed to erase them. She found her way back.